You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is May 20th, 2026, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region, and stories from a liberty perspective. So today's show, we're going to cover a few different topics. We are going to get into the implications of the recent Massie, Kentucky race that happened, where he was unseated just the other day, and the implications that has for MAGA, sort of who is MAGA at this point and what direction are they headed in. We're also going to talk a little bit more about the California governor's primary debates that have all gone on, but we covered some of those in the last show. We're going to cover some more questions from those again today, so we can talk a little bit about some of the issues that came up there, what the candidates were saying. And finally, in our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, we're going to talk a little bit about some craziness coming out of Seattle. But before we do any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. We have with us once again here today, Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name is Jason Fee, and I'll be your host today. So we always like to start out the show with a quote of the day. And since we just had this election in Kentucky and we haven't actually used a quote from this guy before, seemed perfect timing for it. So this will be a quote from Thomas Massie, who we've talked about on the show, but we haven't had one of him do a quote. We've even talked about Rand Paul. We've had a quote from him, but not from Thomas Massie. And I think this one is particularly appropriate because maybe it gets to the heart of what the issue was of why MAGA felt like he needed to be unseated. And so this particular quote says, if legislators always vote with the president, we have a king. If legislators always vote with the prevailing winds, we have mob rule. And if legislators always vote with the Constitution, we have a republic. And, you know, we're going to dive into the story in a little bit, but, you know, I think that's kind of what we want, right? I mean, we want legislators who kind of think about these questions as respect to how they relate to the Constitution. It's not necessarily about aligning with your party, but how to stay true to the Constitution. And if we had a little more of that, I think we'd have a few less problems. And so I think this is a pretty wise quote. And certainly we don't want to go along with mob rule either, just whatever everybody thinks at the time, a populist person. That would probably get you a Bernie Sanders, I imagine. So, but you know, so this is, I think, a pretty astute quote. What do you think, Leon?
Well, the last part of the quote clearly, I think, is germane and quite correct. That I think legislators should always vote with the Constitution. I think when they are sworn in, part of their duty is that they will always be faithful to the Constitution. So I think that is certainly germane. The quote, though, does look a little bit like I have a set of exclusivity embedded in it, in the sense that it presumes that the president, though, I mean, the president will propose things, obviously, and the legislators will write the legislation and vote on it. And it somewhat presumes that the president maybe too often will send up on the Hill or get one of the legislators there to write something that may stand against the Constitution. And it is, I'm not sure that part is necessarily true, even though I'm sure Massie did not probably mean that. But I think overall, though, the quote make good sense, especially, I mean, not only good sense, but practical sense in the terms of the preservation of the Republic. Especially the last part of that quote, I think, says it very clearly that everything we do in making law within the land, or any rules or regulations within the land, within our republic, must be within the boundaries of the Constitution. And too far, and Massie is also speaking to a much larger issue that we are now facing, which is too much of what is happening on Capitol Hill and around the country and the state legislators at local and at the local levels also, that people are making rules and laws that go outside the boundaries of the Constitution. And this has been a big problem of mine and a big problem of all of us here on the show, seeing what is happening to our republic as we seem to be sailing towards that iceberg that we are about to hit, like unfortunately like the Titanic did. So we have to be careful. I think Massie is correct in the general, certainly, yes.
Well, you know, one aspect of this too that got me thinking while we've been talking about it, and you know, unfortunately, all this has happened really fast. This election happened yesterday.
Yeah.
and I just got done preparing the show today, so I haven't had a lot of time to really process everything. But it did occur to me, you know, when he talks about always voting with the president, and of course, you know, we have two parties. So one party is often going to vote against the party of the president. So I mean, already, you know, you have a situation where it's not, you know, everybody within a party. But I think where this kind of comes down to is that, you know, there was a quote by one of the other founding fathers where he warned against the formation of political parties. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of gets a little bit maybe to what Massie might be kind of indicating there, because clearly it's not every legislator, because the legislators of the other party tend to not vote with the president, right? But the ones in the party tend to vote pretty solidly with their president, usually. And, you know, usually there could be some, you know, defections here or there on certain issues. But, you know, the idea that I guess as far as a legislator goes, is he beholden to the citizens of his state that put him in power, or his county, or is he beholden to the leader of his party? And I think maybe that's where some of this conflict maybe comes into play, because as we see two political gangs essentially form, you know, that's what we have nowadays. I mean, other countries, maybe you have a whole bunch of little gangs. We have two big gangs in this country, and they're called Republicans and Democrats.
So some of them are really gangsters, you know. You know, but this is this is a very good issue that you are raising, and as you know, one of our former colleagues on the show and I got into a long discussion about this very matter. It got deep, quite frankly. But the point is, though, if you have an elected official, in this case, we're talking about Thomas Massie, who is he beholden to? Is he beholden to the people who elected him? Is he beholden to the party that he claims to be a member of? Or is he beholden to, say, the president who's the leader of the party? Now, I certainly believe that any elected official is beholden to his constituents, the people who send him there to represent their voice. And I think he must dutifully and faithfully carry out his duties with that in mind. Now, there are times where your principles will get will diverge from that of your constituents, and if your moral conscience or if your principles stand above your duty to your constituents, then I think it's your duty then to resign from your position, because you cannot represent the voice of the people and still hold to your principles. And if you have reached that point in your career, then because I think you're beholden to them. These are the people that send you there. But then that raises a very difficult question. What if the people are very supportive of things that go against the Constitution?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Right. And this is a problem that I think that Massie got into, in the sense that he had his principles that he wanted to hold on to, but the things that he voted against are very popular in his district. Trump won the Kentucky 4th district. Trump won that by 30 plus points. The man is very popular in the Kentucky 4th. And Massie was caught in the center, struggling to represent the voice of those people and yet trying to hold on to his principles. And the only way I saw out of that for him was that he had to resign his position, because obviously he could not represent the people anymore, even though he may have been very well correct in his votes. I mean, I may have some disagreements with him, but he may have been very well correct in the vote, things he chose to vote against. But he could not represent his district anymore. So, because his district were very popular, the policies that he voted against were very popular in his district, the fourth district of Kentucky. So, I think his only choice, quite frankly, is was to walk away from the district. I think he had to resign. I mean, that would really show how much his principles meant to him, because when you look at the loss, okay, if you look at the results of the election yesterday, I mean, he lost by double digits.
Well, one thing I did want to point out, because you've mentioned several times that Trump won by 30 points or something, but if you look at most of Massie's primaries that happened before that, he was winning that district literally by those types of margins. So the question starts to become, is it really completely an issue that it's almost, I guess we're going to get into this a little bit, but sometimes it does feel like some of these races are getting to the point where, by the way, this was a record-setting race as far as money goes into the district. And so, obviously a lot of money goes into negative ads. Negative ads a lot of times say things that aren't necessarily true about a politician in order to get them ousted. All right. And so I don't want to necessarily say that maybe the people had necessarily changed. It's hard to know exactly, right, if they changed or were they kind of plied by ads that, weren't necessarily all the truest ads in the world, I guess. So
I think, Jason, it is clear in American politics. I'll even go over the politics all over the world, that when they're competing for an office, negative ads dominate the airwaves. That is true all over this country. And while negative ads could make a difference in the polling date, in the outcome of the election, I am not sure that negative ads could produce the kind of results we saw from Massie yesterday. I could see a 2 or 3 point movement in one direction or the other based upon the negative ads. But you're still talking at the baseline. This man lost his district, a district where he was very popular at one time. He lost his, and Trump previously had endorsed him. But a district he lost by double digits. That is something more than the negative ads. Has to be. A negative ads will only do 2 or 3 points one way or the other.
I do have some videos that we can get into to talk a little bit about what Massie's positions were on certain things, and how various people in MAGA tried to frame him. So MAGA meaning Trump's the Republican Party under Trump, essentially. So I think that's instructive. But before we get to that, I did want to bring up just a little bit, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit on the show, but here's an article from Politico, and when we talk about this being the most expensive race ever, there was somewhere between 32 and 35 million that it's, I guess people are saying so far has been recorded on this. And I think Massie was guessing at his post, what do they call that? Concession speech, I think, or some of the discussions he had after that. But I think he thought it was even more than that, it's likely. And he also, too, he did concede that they weren't massively outspent. They had a lot of money coming in from across the country to support Massie. So they weren't massively outspent. He said they were never outspent more than 2-to-1 on any day, but they were outspent. But it's interesting where the money came from, because, and I know we'll have a little bit of argument about this, Leon, but there was an awful lot of money that came from interests that were outside of the United States, in the sense of people who have foreign policy desires. And one of Massie's biggest points is to stay out of foreign conflicts and end foreign aid. And so the idea that so much money essentially came from sort of an APAC adjacent or APAC aligned PACs, super PACs. I mean, we're literally talking about a combined total of at least $16 million in this. The money from this race came from those types of entities that were aligned essentially with foreign policy that was very pro-Israel. So that's so anyway. So I mean, that is a very big issue as far as potentially, and we'll be talking about that as one of the issues. But go ahead, Leon.
Okay, first of all, let's just be clear. APAC is not a foreign. They lobby for Israel. That is true. I do not dispute that. But they themselves is not a foreign entity. They are American citizens based here in the United States who lobby for Israel. They do. So I don't know. I don't know, because foreign money in U.S. elections actually is illegal. Quite illegal, actually. So I don't think we're talking about foreign money per se. Now, you could question where APAC got its money from, okay? But that was money, the money that was spent in Massie's race by APAC, as far as I know, were all domestic money. There were other groups also who spent a lot of money in this race also, and stuff like that. I don't know the source of their money.
Well, and just to be clear, one of the names that has popped up many times is Miriam Adelson. So right. She is hugely aligned with Trump, and she's hugely aligned with pro-Israel causes. So, right. You know, and so
and she's a U.S. citizen based.
She's a dual citizen. She's a dual citizen.
Right.
Citizen of Israel too.
Yeah.
So
okay, but at least she's a U.S. citizen at the very least, right?
Yeah. And she's and just to give people sort of flavor too, I mean, she's also purchased CBS recently, and so their reporting has shifted a little bit. It's been a little bit less antagonistic toward Republican causes. I mean, it hasn't completely given up on that, but there's been a shift under Barry Weiss, because she has been sort of made the boss over there, and she is also, you know, sort of a very pro-Israel type of person as well.
But the problem, you see, Jason, the problem I'm having with all of this is that money, outside groups spending money in local races, even though you're right, this one was record spending, okay? I think $35 million is the number I heard, okay? I heard that number. You say it might be more. I don't know, but it might be more. But let us say it's $35 million, and it was a record number. We'll all concede that. But the fact of the matter is, outside money in races and primaries or in general election races coming in to support one candidate or the other, that is absolutely nothing new. It is nothing new for us to expect outside money to come in. When we had the election, I don't remember about the Georgia races. We had two Georgia races. I think it was after the 2020 election, I believe, and stuff like that. There were millions, those were Senate races, though. Millions and millions of money that came from outside Georgia. I didn't hear anybody make any accusation about foreign money. I didn't hear anything about that, because foreign money actually is illegal, as I just said. But money coming from outside Kentucky for a Kentucky race, or outside of Georgia for a Georgia race, or outside of California for a California race, that is absolutely nothing new.
And to be fair, some amount of money also came to Massie, but I think the amount of money that came from Massie, most people would expect was one, it was a little more grassroots, and it was, but it was also spread throughout the United States, because he has an awful lot of fans throughout the United States. But that said, you know, it wasn't concentrated money the way this money was for Ed Gowrain, who most people might not know who Ed Gowrain is, because Ed Gowrain, we talked about him before, but this was a debate between Thomas Massie and Ed Gowrain. And as you can see, there's no Ed Gowrain here. And I think they had opportunities for other debates too, but it's a similar issue. No Ed Gowrain. so Ed Gowrain, because nobody really knows who he is, he's sort of taken on the moniker of Chicken Ed. Debate. The only way you know who he is because it's what Trump tells you about him. and quite frankly, on the campaign trail, Trump said, "Just give me a warm body." So, but I mean, he does have a military record, so it sounds
he does. Yes,
found
he does.
somebody with a military record and ran him with a lot of money.
We should thank him for his service, but I'm not trying anything else. But before we leave this point, I just want to be clear, as far as I can see, as best as I could penetrate what went on in the Kentucky 4th District. That district soured on Massie. He might have been right in the positions he took. I'm not disputing that. But the district itself, the 4th District, soured on Massie. And Massie then opened the door to let other people come in and influence his constituents more than they already soured against him.
That's part of the question I think we're going to get to, is exactly what they soured on, because I think that's part of the question of what MAGA is today and where they're going. Because I think one of the things we're going to see is that Massie hasn't really changed. It's essentially his constituents in his district have changed, and they have very likely changed because the guy at the top of MAGA has changed. So I think that's what we're going to see. And I guess the question is, it really begs the question is, what is MAGA? So I do have a video that I wanted to share because, and this is a little bit of what we showed a couple weeks ago, because we were trying to just talk about that debate that Massie had, because I just wanted to show the debate. I mean, the idea that this guy is running against Massie and he won't even show up to debate. I've never seen that before, a debate run with an empty chair. So anyway,
I've known about people refusing to debate, but never somebody not showing up, for a scheduled debate. I've never seen that one.
Exactly. And at the time too, Massie was up, which was also unusual, because if Massie's up and you are down, you want to take every opportunity you can for that free media to get your message out. And he didn't really. In fact, I do have a little short video before we get to the video about Massie I wanted to show. I guess I'll show this really little short video about Chicken Ed. And I mean, we don't know a lot about him, but here's a really short snippet on, I guess, how loyal you can expect him to be to President Trump. So here we go.
Noted how the Kentucky business community and farmers are being squeezed by the rising cost of fuel and fertilizer. That prompted me to ask how he feels about the war in Iran, which has caused prices to soar.
The president is playing five-dimensional chess. He is resetting the entire global power structure.
Okay, so there we go. 5D chess.
5-dimensional chess. Wow, I can't think about what that could be.
I used to hear about 4D chess. He's up the game. Yes. 5D chess. I guess that's how you get the endorsement. In fact, I even heard one report where he talked something about 9D chess. Well, I think it's pretty clear he is going to be a solid vote for Trump in the future.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yes.
So anyways, let's hear a little bit from Thomas Massie in his own words, and I think we'll also hear a little bit from J.D. Vance as well, about one, who Thomas Massie is and how this occurred. There we go.
Why are you still wanting to go back to Washington? What more do you think you can accomplish that you haven't since 2012?
Well, I see a need in Washington, D.C. There are a lot of people there who are scared to voice their opinion, scared to advocate for their constituents. A lot of times you'll see that I might be the only no vote. They don't dislike me for being an obstructionist. That's not why I've drawn the ire of the swamp and have an opponent here. They dislike me because I'm transparent. And if I'm not in Congress, there won't be somebody reading every bill and explaining what's in the bills.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
And so I think if our republic is going to work, somebody needs to be up there shining a light on things so that the voters, this would be more important than getting term limits. If we could separate the votes into single issues instead of having giant bills with things in it that nobody knows about because they didn't read in it, that would be the biggest reform we could have. But in the meantime, I'm up there. Sometimes I'm the only vote. Sometimes I'm the only voice. And I get out there and tell people what's in these bills.
So that's a little bit about who Thomas Massie is and what he believes his role is up there. But we've heard a lot of Republican criticism, especially coming from Trump, that he is disloyal, that he is, I guess, double crosses them or betrays them. Well, let's hear a little bit more, I guess, from J.D. Vance about what that complaint is, and then we'll hear from Thomas Massie on his thoughts on it.
I think the problem with Thomas, and I've told him this in private, and now I guess I'll say it in public, is it's one thing to disagree with the party on a particular issue. It's one thing to to have your independent stand on a number of questions. And by the way, some of the stuff where Thomas Massie has been independent against the Republican Party, I've agreed with him with. Thomas and I worked together during 2023, where I was trying to stop the limitless flow of American money to Ukraine, and Thomas was one of the people I was working closest with it. But that's one thing. Being independent, having your own opinions is one thing. Voting against the party on every single issue, you're eventually going to make too many enemies. And that is the problem that Thomas has had.
And here is Massie's response.
Look, I vote with the Republican Party and this president 90% of the time. And the 10% of the time that I'm not voting with the party or the president, I'm keeping the promises that the president and I campaigned on. And I'm voting consistently for the same things that I voted for regardless of who the president is. That's lower spending, no foreign entanglements, that's warrants if you're going to spy on Americans, keeping the Constitution sacrosanct. Those are and not bankrupting this country. Those are the things where 10% of the time I have to deviate from the party because I'm keeping promises to people in Kentucky.
And one other big promise that we got to say before we leave public access for our break here is the Epstein files. And we'll talk about that a little bit too, but that was also a promise that was made, and wasn't really a promise that Thomas Massie made, but it was a promise that the president made.
Yes.
So
he and Pam Bondi.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this was certainly very much a MAGA issue. And it was really only Thomas Massie that was standing by the MAGA promise on that issue. But anyways, if you happen to be watching us on public access, this conversation is going to continue online. So you can check out the rest of the conversation at knuckleheadsofliberty.com. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the issues around Thomas Massie, and then we're going to get into the California gubernatorial debate issues, because that primary is coming up in a few weeks here in California. So go check that out. Okay, Leon, did you have any thoughts on that before we, I did have some other video to show, but I just wanted to hear if you had any issues with what you heard so far.
I don't have much disagreement with Thomas Massie in terms of the things he stands for. Okay, that's not my problem. And he even said he voted the party 90% of the time. That is also true as far as I know. The issue is there were some critical votes, and this is where this whole souring of his constituent began. There were some critical votes which he voted no on. And that is where his problems began. Because he was very popular in his district. There's no doubt about that. And yeah. I will stand by what I'm about to say. The district soured on him, and Massie opened the door for his own demise. I firmly believe that.
I guess
I agree with a lot of the positions he takes, quite frankly. I do.
I guess the part of the issue, though, is did the district sour on him because he betrayed the MAGA promises, or did that sour on him because MAGA betrayed its own promises and Massie stuck with them? That's kind of the issue here. Now, I'm not saying necessarily, I mean, if your constituency decides suddenly that they don't want to go along in the same direction anymore, then, like you said, I guess you just can't represent them anymore. If if they decide they they all want to be communist robots, for Putin. I guess you just can't represent them anymore, right? so
Well,
just because you want them to be something else doesn't mean they will be, right?
Well, let me show you a very typical example that is going on right now, and the problems. The Republicans is going to face some real headwinds because of this issue. When Trump came into office, gas prices were quite high. I'm talking the second time. Gas prices were quite high. Trump promised to lower those prices, and he spoke about this quite eloquently, and he spoke about this quite forcefully. He was going to lower prices. Then he started a war in Iran. I support him start war because I do not want nuclear weapons in the hands of those fanatics in Iran. However, 20% of the world's oil supply goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Very little of it comes here, but some do. Most of it goes to Europe and other places, and China and those sort of places. But the point is, though, now we are looking at the prices at the pump. I mean, you're talking about $4.50, $4.60, $4.85, I think is what I saw recently at the pump. Now, the Republicans are going to face this problem. People are souring on Trump because of the high gas prices, which he promised to keep low. Okay? Now, look at somebody like me. I support Trump. I do. But it's very difficult for me to argue with anybody about the gas prices they face at the pump every day. Now, I know why it's higher. To me, it's a good reason why it is higher, because of the Strait of Hormuz. But to most of the people who having to face this thing every day, it's not reasonable or rational that prices should be where they are. Now, I think I could explain it. I think I could. But the average Joe, I would say they would not explain when every day they go to the pump is north of $4, especially if you're here in California, north of $4.50, they're facing. So the point is, though, even though you may come into power, into representing your district or whatever, and that kind of stuff, you come in with great gusto. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, and you're going to do the other. Circumstances change. The district hold on to the promise, and you hold on to your principles. What do you do then? What do you do then? Now, based upon what Massie said, you don't run with the wind, which I agree with. He also say you don't vote to the president all the time, which I also agree with. But you also vote to the Constitution, which I also agree with. But the fact of the matter is, the practical issue on the ground is always what do you do when circumstances change and your principles are still standing in front of you? And this is what Massie's dilemma was, I believe. And this is why his district soured on him, because he voted against things, two very critical bills that I could think about. He voted against them, and they are very popular in his own district. I mean, the man might have been right. I'm not gonna dismiss his vote. He might have been right in the position he took. But you're not representing your district when you're making votes that your district find very popular.
Well,
you might be right constitutionally, but practically you may not be. So
I think there were three big issues here. I mean, if we're going to get right down to brass tacks, one of them was the no new wars issue. So, right. I mean, certainly that was, Trump has been a much more aggressive president, we should say, in his second term than he was in his first term on foreign policy. And another was essentially Massie's attempting to block the big, beautiful bill. Right. And so that's another one. And then finally, there's the Epstein files. So let me play at least a little video. This doesn't cover the big, beautiful bill, but it does cover the other things, and also what Trump has been saying about Massie, just so we kind of understand, I guess, the amount of vitriol that some of this stuff is bringing up.
We don't want to get into wars. We're tired of fighting. I'm the only president in the last 84 years that didn't start a war. Under Trump, we will have no more wars. No more wars. No more wars. We will have prosperity and peace. We will have prosperity and we will have peace. Remember, I'm the president of peace. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. He's going to start a war. I said, no, no, no. My rhetoric is going to keep us out of war.
So Trump clearly promised no new wars. What about Epstein?
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you're able to, you'll be...
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. But yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
So Thomas Massie didn't change his opinion on either of those. It's actually Trump who changed his position on those things, on what he ran on. But let's hear what Trump has to say about Massie.
Thomas Massie is a disaster for our party. But Massie's a complete and total disaster as a congressman and, frankly, as a human being. We got to get rid of this loser. This guy is bad. He's disloyal to the Republican Party. He's disloyal to the people of Kentucky. And most importantly, he is disloyal to the United States of America.
And I think one of the issues that's coming, and this is why I almost want to go back to the quote when he talks about if legislators always vote with the president, we have a king. Because what we saw here, and what we saw with J.D. Vance talking about earlier too, that we saw was essentially J.D. Vance was saying, well, you know, he always votes against us, or he votes against us on really important things. And so this is part of the issue of why they have to get rid of him. And then you heard Thomas Massie counter, no, actually, I vote with you guys most of the time. It's just been on a handful of issues here, and that's when I'm keeping my promises. Is what he's saying. And if you bought into that was the only issue, well, now here Lauren Boebert comes out to join Massie on the campaign trail to help her friend run. And then she immediately gets a notice from Trump that he is now going to primary her out of the party as well. And he already did threaten Marjorie Taylor Greene and got her out of the party, but she just willingly stepped aside because she wasn't up for the fight. So, but this is kind of where this, I guess, quote maybe has a little bit of resonance on some of this issue, is because, you know, is MAGA becoming a party where you just literally cannot disagree with Donald Trump? So,
well, I don't know if I will accept,
unless your name is Mamdani, then you can disagree with them and be good buddies. Sorry, go ahead, Leon.
I don't know if that is true of the Republicans. I think we have a wide range of disagreement within the Republican Party. I'm not a Republican, but I do most times vote with them. But I think there's a wide range of discussion that go on. There's a wide range of dissent that go on. Some of us have even accused the Republicans of being spineless because they have a lot of important issues they have not been able to get through the Senate, and in some cases the House, mostly the Senate. I mean, they're totally spineless, I think. And so I don't think that disagreement is really the issue in terms of the wide range of ideas that the Republicans push. What I do think about MAGA, though, is that the leader of the MAGA movement, Trump, have some very clear ideas about what he wants America to be.
That change. That are subject to change.
Well, yes, but I have to say that change, yes, but with a caveat. Okay, he did say, for instance, he did campaign on no new wars. He did campaign on bringing down gas prices, and once he got into office, circumstances changed. Okay, for instance, even though maybe and truly he should have been able to see this more clearly about Iran getting nuclear weapons, he should have known that more clearly before he got into office, because
And by the way, timetable, just so everybody knows, Fordor was attacked, I think, within 6 months of Trump coming to office. So, and that was the nuclear enrichment site in Iran. And so they bombed that in Midnight Hammer, an operation that took, like 9 days or something like that. And subsequently said he blew it or he obliterated it and the threat was gone. But now we're back in Iran. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood where this is all coming from.
Well, it is true. What you just said is absolutely true. But we know Trump does always get ahead of himself. He makes boastful statements that does not many times don't withstand scrutiny. He did say, yes, we obliterated their nuclear program. Obviously, they did not. Okay, maybe the intelligence wasn't good enough, just like we had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that turned out to be a bust. But the point is, though, when presidents come into office, circumstances change on them. All right, and I don't see anything wrong if a president has a rational reason for changing his campaign promises. Okay, now if Trump could get out of Iran with a deal for them not to have nuclear weapons, I will still support the fact that he said no new wars, right? Not that there was never a new war under him, but he did something far greater than the campaign promise. I have children and grandchildren who I want to live in peace in this great land of ours. And I think it's vitally important for those fanatics in Iran not to have a nuclear weapon. So I will continue to support Trump on this endeavor, even though it's a break of his campaign promises. It's a breach of his campaign promises, because this thing must not happen. It must not. It is vital. That's what I believe. And I think anybody who has a child or a grandchild should agree with me. But I'm not forcing that upon anybody. I'm a liberty-minded person, but this is vital. So all of that, though, given
Leon, before we leave that one point, though, I did want to push back just a tiny bit on it, and it's the sense that, maybe you're right that maybe circumstances did change potentially that made him think there was a greater threat. But the only kind of crazy thing that we cannot forget in this whole lead-up is that his director of intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, told him there were no threats, or she went to Congress and said there were no threats from Iran. So, how Trump had information that was somehow greater than what our national intelligence would have, because she's the one he appointed to that. It almost makes you think, well, he's getting his intelligence somewhere other than there. Now, I think she eventually bent to whatever it was he was saying on that. But the point is, it didn't come from her initially. So, because the public information, unless she was lying to Congress about it, that's not what we were being told as a public. So,
well, there was, you're right. There was some confusion about what was a threat and what was not, whether Iran was a threat or not. And Tulsi did testify that there was no, what were her words? I wish we had the video. She didn't say there was no threat, but she did minimize the extent of the threat. Is that what she did? Okay, she certainly did that. And a reporter asked Trump about it just around that time, and I think within hours of her testimony. And Trump said, no, she's wrong. He said that flat out. She's wrong. So where he was getting his intelligence from, I don't know. But I think though, that even though there might have been some disagreement within the Trump administration about the extent of this threat, especially Tulsi being the director of national intelligence, wherever the intelligence was coming from, whatever the disagreement was ongoing, there is no doubt that the Iranians were building a nuclear weapon. They even told our negotiators when they started back after the bombing began, when the negotiations started again, that they have enough material to build 11 bombs. and they're already developing the technology to transport those bombs to wherever they wanted it to go, because we know they have the technology. They're shooting bombs all over the place. They probably have not shot a nuclear one as yet, but they have the technology. And clearly, there's enough intelligence. There's enough intelligence, even of words out of the mouth of the Iranian themselves. I think one of them was the foreign minister, if I'm not mistaken, who told them they have the material to build a bomb. So obviously Trump was wrong when he said he obliterated. He might have obliterated one site, but he obviously didn't obliterate all of them. So I still think he was right to break his campaign promise on that point. He really was. I still believe that. And this probably puts him in conflict with Massie and Massie's principles.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the big conflicts. Yeah. But let's leave that conflict, because maybe there's some room that the two of them can be on different sides and it can be legitimate on that. But as far as the Epstein files go, what room is there possible for? I mean, this is something that so many people in MAGA were just clenching their hands together for, that they were going to get to see people marched over the Epstein files. This was supposed to represent all of the deep state crimes that were going on, all of the craziness that's happening, extra legally within our government. And, either for the corruption that allowed Epstein to exist, or potentially that it was an intelligence honeypot operation happening there, because there were some really high profile people going over there. And, and I guess some of the suggestions are that, some of these people may have been having sex with underage people there. And yes, I mean, that's literally all you have to get leverage over somebody. and if these people are near the top decision makers in the country, right, then you can suddenly see how, hey, this really has huge implications potentially. And the idea that MAGA was so intense on going after this, and then suddenly, once Trump administration was on it, it was like, well, Pam Bondi, the files are sitting on my desk, which turned out they weren't. It turned out there were no files, she said later. she handed a dossier to a bunch of right-wing influencers and said, more to come. There was no more to come at that time. She said later there's no more to come. Then Massie forced them with, and there's also the video footage from the prison. Apparently there was a camera that had an angle on the cell. And when they claimed they were handing over all the video, and surprisingly, when they handed the video over, there was about a minute missing around the time that Epstein died. And they said, this is perfect. This is exactly how security videos are supposed to be. And of course, all this on top of, remember when this happened in 2019, when Epstein died, cameras mysteriously weren't working, the guards were asleep. Right?
or shopping on Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, anyways, I mean, this is just one thing after another. When you have a guy that is potentially this important, and he was on a suicide watch too. So, I mean, more reason to have attention on his cell, not less, right? So, and I'm certainly the first to say government incompetence, right? This is a government prison. Yes. That doesn't surprise me at all. But it's just the issue after issue after issue with these investigators who are supposed to be looking into this. And then the only way, after everybody said there's no more files, then Massie forces the Epstein Transparency Act, and then a bunch more stuff gets released, right? So we're seeing lie after lie after lie. And so, yeah, I mean, you could see how this was irritating the Trump administration. But the big question is, why didn't the Trump administration just, make good on his promise and investigate this thoroughly and transparently in front of everybody? So, and yet MAGA, many people in MAGA have now just gone along because Trump said there's nothing to see here. Now suddenly a lot of MAGA is, okay, there's nothing to see here. Right? It's almost like that scene in Star Wars where Ben Kenobi, the stormtroopers come up. Are those the droids we're looking for? These are not the droids you're looking for. Okay, let's go over there. I mean, that's literally what we're seeing here with MAGA, right?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, this this episode of the Epstein files and the transparency or lack thereof will go down in history of one of the most poorly handled episodes in any presidency in our history. I mean, we had top government officials telling us about the things on their desks and later on having to retract those statements. We had them saying that there's nothing more. And then we saw about a dump of 1 million files or whatever it was that came out eventually. I mean, now you're sitting down and you're wondering if there are things that they have held back. We don't know. It's really kind of disconcerting that you're seeing people who you believed were competent in handling issues like that to not to be so incompetent on this particular issue. The only thing I do hold on to, though, is that if there were anything in those files that involved or implicated Trump in any misconduct, Joe Biden and his cronies certainly would have released it. So I do not believe there's anything there that implicates Donald Trump.
Well, yeah. And I almost want to agree with you on that, because that does seem like if the Democrats had it in their hands, they would have done something. That doesn't mean that there wasn't dirt on people that both the Democrats and Trump could be protecting, right?
Yeah. That's the next thing I was going to say. There might have been, maybe, I don't know, people around the administration, this one and the previous one, who probably could have been or probably would be implicated if the files ever came out. The one thing, though, I have to say is that, and this is just, I have no good evidence on this, is that Dan Bongino, who used to be the deputy director of the FBI, he have not said anything or insinuate anything that will suggest that there's some dirtiness out there that need to come out. He have said so far that as far as he knows, there's nothing else that will implicate anybody high level other than what is in the last batch of things that were released. So I kind of hold on to that, but is that good enough? Oh, obviously not.
No, so, and in my opinion, he's discredited himself. But I mean, I guess that's different opinion. Some people in MAGA especially are very much holding on to the credibility of Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and the assurances that they've made that there's nothing to see there. To me, it very much feels like they have discredited themselves as well.
Why would you feel Bongino is discredited?
He came out.
He's outside the administration now.
But he was inside the administration when he was saying that. And when he was inside the administration, I mean, he was one of the biggest cheerleaders for getting to the, inside the Epstein files.
He was.
And once he got in there, suddenly he was saying, "Hey guys, I've seen all the stuff. There's nothing to see here. It's all legit." And it was sort of like, okay, well, why don't you guys just release the video? And then it was sort of like, oh, well, it's going to take a while because there's so much video to go. This video is like 5-6 years old, right? I mean, this is 2019, and we're talking about a day of video at best, less than 1 day's worth of video. So, I mean, that sounded like a pretty hollow excuse to begin with. But he wasn't calling attention to the issue that, hey, look, we just literally handed you a video that's missing minutes when everybody is telling you that this thing is whole and complete. So I don't know. I mean, to me, and by the way, he is one of the biggest attackers of Massie now that he's out of the administration as well, claiming that Massie is a turncoat and terrible and all kinds of other stuff too. So Anyways.
well, like I said at the top of my statement that I have no good evidence to support what I've said about Dan Bongino, even though I still tend to think he's a straight shooter. But since he have been outside the administration, he have said nothing different from when he was inside the administration. So even if I would agree with you about him being somewhat discredited, I still hold on until proven wrong to his somewhat, I wouldn't say total, but his somewhat credibility on this issue.
Keep in mind too, when he leaves the administration, I mean, he may have a lot of issues. One, he may be revealing state secrets potentially. I guess he'd have to be a whistleblower if he were to say that this is, that the story's not true. But the other thing too is, I mean, if he leaves the administration, now suddenly he becomes an enemy of MAGA if he decides. And then the big question is, why didn't you say anything while you were there? When you could have made it.
No. Okay, I have to disagree on that one. He did say there was nothing else there before he left office.
No, I get that. That's what I'm saying. If there was something else there and he were to come out after he left and say, okay, by the way, guys, there was something there and I was too much of a coward to do anything about it while I was there. You know what I mean? That wouldn't play very well for him. It'd be like, why didn't you stand up and do something about it while you were there? Yeah. Okay. So that's the question, So I don't think that there's any particular, credibility that he definitely brings. But I agree. I used to hear him before and I used to think, man, this would be great. He's going into the Trump administration and he'll be a positive asset. But I don't know what to think about him after coming out. I just know there's a lot of question marks.
Well, the story was, I don't know this one is true either. He couldn't get along with Pam Bundy. He and Pam Bundy, it is said, or it is that at least rumored, he and Pam Bundy had quite a lot of run-ins. And Bongino left, and a couple of months later, Pam Bundy was also out. So I think there's some truth to that, and I think that that was part of the reason why he left the administration. Now, were those run-ins because of the Epstein files issue? I don't know. Now, nobody seemed to know about what the run-ins were about. So there are all these unanswered questions.
Well, there is one other issue I did want to get to with Massie, but we've gone so long, I'm not sure we have time for the California debate stuff. So, Leon, I don't know, did you want to hold the California gubernatorial debate stuff till next week? Because there's actually still time before the election there, although I don't know that. Yeah, the show would make it out the Monday before the voting Tuesday, even though most people might have already voted by mail. But we could have a longer show on the gubernatorial debate next week because we had 3 issues we wanted to go over. This week we were going to go over house pricing in California, insurance, and the social media for kids, the potential ban because of the recent lawsuit that came out against Meta and I guess Google or somebody against the way they've influenced kids, I guess, with this stuff. So we'll talk about those later because we've still got our Knucklehead Noise Patrol too. So this will give us another 10 or 15 minutes, I guess, before we wrap up here. But one of the things that made Trump mad with Massie as well, and this isn't necessarily a MAGA campaign promise, although I would bet you if you had polled people in MAGA before Trump came into office this last time, that most of them thought debt was a problem, right? And because our debt is literally at $39 trillion. When Trump came into office, it was less than $37 trillion. So it's already grown around $3 trillion with him in office. And the last time he was in office, it was over $7 trillion. And he still has over 2.5 more years to go. So he will have more debt added to the national debt than any president in history. Although proportionally, I think Obama may still beat him as per the amount of debt at the time that he added, Yes. But still, Trump is a debt monster. Let's put it that way. He's not, and this, of course, is running directly into the principles that Thomas Massie was talking that says he stands for. And as you mentioned, as we both talked about earlier, one of the things Massie did is he voted against the big, beautiful bill, because the big, beautiful bill, as you recall, had to do with throwing Elon Musk out and his ideas of cutting foreign aid spending and all that stuff. And, it wasn't really getting at cutting spending. It was about giving Trump the money for the programs that Trump thought he needed money for. But as I've said, we've already added over $3 trillion to the current debt. So since, we're over $39 trillion at the moment and growing like crazy. And
we will hit 40 pretty soon, because I think it's like 39.6 or 39.7. So we are about to hit 40.
And this is our old debt to GDP chart that we keep bringing out. And I think it's a little out of date, even though they say this is for the CBO claims this is in 2026. But the current number of, so if you look here, they show that debt to GDP is right around World War II levels. And the reason we're showing this instead of just debt by itself is because you've got to kind of understand how big the country's economy is in order to really think about how big the debt is. And, because you have inflation and all these other issues that happen over time. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. But, when we look here, we are at levels similar to World War II, as we've talked about before. And this actually undersells it, because this is showing, I don't know, about 110% or something debt to GDP. The current number is 39 trillion. And the current GDP, though, I just looked up on Google, was about 32 trillion. So we are somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, of around 120% or something like that. But the highest it's ever been, okay, for this country. That is, a scary thing. And that's literally one of Massie's core things. And Massie was not voting to just stop the president from doing what he wanted to do. He's voting because he's committed to not burdening our grandchildren with all this debt. and in fact, I think it was Thomas Jefferson, I think, that said, it's the duty of every generation not to pass the debt on to their kids, He said something to that effect. So
we're doing a lot of that right now, quite frankly. We really are.
So that is who Thomas Massie is. So when we talk about, what MAGA is and where they're going, and I did also too, here's a chart of just the debt itself in raw numbers, and you can see we're over 39 trillion. It says 39.07, but I thought I saw in Google, this might be out of date slightly. Thought it said it was at 39.2 at this point. So,
I don't know. I thought I read 39.6, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. We usually show a chart that goes all the way back to 1900. So this looks like a really steep hockey stick. But unfortunately, I was trying to pull up the chart before the show, and I couldn't find that chart, but I found another chart that only goes back to 1993. So it doesn't quite show the significance of that, unless are these supposed to be? No, this isn't. So I'm not sure what those other lines are, but anyways, this is the current debt that we have. So this probably disaggregates the debt. So debt held by the public versus intergovernmental holdings. So that's what those other two lines are. But anyways, that is why sometimes, and it, as Thomas Massie said in the video that we showed, sometimes he's voting no because they can't separate these issues out. And if there's something in a bill that is bad, you may also have something in it that's good. But if the bad outweighs the good, then he's got to vote against it. And a lot of times people get smeared by saying, oh my God, you voted against candy for children. How dare you? Because that was in the bill. But there may have been, poison for children in the same bill too, right? Anyway, yeah.
We're gonna trans kids. That was in the bill too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was part of the bit. I think that did maintain funding for transing kids in that bill. So there you go.
The thing is what do we do when we have the good and we want the perfect? Okay. And I think this was part of Thomas Massie's issues, I would say. Maybe I may even say part of his problems. I think the big beautiful bill had some very bad things in it. There's no doubt about that. There's some pork in there that I didn't expect Trump to be supporting, and then calling it a big beautiful bill on top of that. But there were some good things in that bill, like tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security starting.
By the way, I'm actually, not that we want to digress, but I'm actually not a big fan of no tax on tips. I like the idea of just reducing everybody's taxes, but the idea that you're picking and choosing for different people, to me, that starts to get into class warfare issues, and I'd much rather just keep it simple, just reduce everybody's taxes. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, we all pray for the flat tax and just leave it at that, and I'll be fine with that. But having said that, if we don't have that, this is the issue about the perfect and the good, right? This is the issue that we are making the good the enemy of the perfect, and I don't think that we can run a country or we could get anything done if that is always our mantra, that we're going to make the good the enemy of the perfect. So
except though that, Leon, one thing I wanted to point out, that what Massie said in that earlier video is what we want to get to ideally is where we can separate these issues out so that we can force everybody to vote. People who want to vote for the poison can be in a very lonely group voting for that poison and take the ire of their constituents or everybody else's constituents. Because, a lot of times people vote for what's poison for the country because it's sugar for their district.
Exactly. But you see, but this is just the problem. Politics, as we all know, is really the art of compromise. That's what it is. Sometimes compromise is a very dirty word, okay? It really is. But politics is the art of compromise. So maybe we want the tax cuts, okay? I wanted them because I think they are good, all right? And in order to get some help from whoever, maybe is in the party or maybe outside the party, maybe a few Democrats to come in, we had to give them something, quote unquote, some poison to bring them in. It's the art of compromise. If you gonna stand on your principles all the time, you'll never get anything done. Okay, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we don't want the government getting any bigger. So that is, and you see that as a greater threat than anything else. And and I probably would agree with you. But the fact of the matter is the art of compromising. How do you get around that goalpost if you're going to say I am against any more government spending, end of story. If that's the end of your story, if that's the end of your negotiations, then you never get anything done. So do we want to get stuff done, or do we want to stand firmly on principles? And that's the question that Trump and Massie and J.D. Vance and all these guys had to answer. Massie told us where he stood. No more government spending, no more wars. He won the Epstein file. He told us exactly where he stood. We all knew it. We all understood it. And hell, most of us agreed with him. But the fact of the matter is, politics is the art of compromising. And if you don't learn that, I don't think you're going to last as long as a legislator. So, is that good? I don't know.
I can understand that a little bit, Leon, but I also have to point out, too, that we've compromised our way up this hill. And I don't know when we stop climbing that hill. And it's important that we do, because I just want to make sure everybody understands. This is like the check engine light on your car is not just flashing red, but it's saying, pull the hell over, stupid, and get to the garage. Your car is going to blow up. Okay. And we are just ignoring it. We are, and Thomas Massie is one of the few voices, and in 7 months, he's not going to be there anymore as a voice. It's saying put the brakes on. It's going to be a lot more people who just say, well, Trump said, what's another trillion this year? So what's another trillion suddenly is the cry of MAGA. I mean, this is part of the question of what is MAGA and where is it going? Does MAGA care about this debt anymore? Or does MAGA not care about this debt? Well, I mean, we know the Democrats don't care about this debt, right? It would just be very sad if MAGA also doesn't care about this debt anymore either, because it makes a very lonely group of people who are left caring about a debt that is essentially going to destroy the country at some point. I mean, this is the plot of the path that we're taking toward the iceberg. We can see it. We know it's coming.
No, it's coming.
We just keep compromising our way to it, right?
You know, Jason, I do wonder how bad is the debt situation in this country? How bad is it? No, I wonder about that. And why do I say that? In our name,
you're starting to sound like a Keynesian.
No. Let me finish my thought. In our name, the federal government hold millions and millions of acres of land. Okay, that have to have significant value. Fort Knox owns God knows how much gold, maybe trillions of dollars.
Remember, Ron Paul wants to audit that. So the real question is, truly, God knows how much gold.
Okay. I will grant you that. But we know there's a substantial amount of gold in Fort Knox. We know that for sure. Okay. So how bad is our debt situation, given the fact the federal government was holding all this valuable land, and I think it's way too much. The federal government is holding in our name, and holding all this gold also in our name. So is the debt situation really bad? Can we sell off these assets and pay off the debt, or come close to paying it off? I will venture to say yes, we could.
I think you might be right. I mean, certainly there's a good argument for not holding all this land under the public, right? I mean, the idea is we don't, if you truly want to get to a more libertarian world, you want the government to get as small as possible, right?
Exactly.
And to divest itself of as many things as possible, because the government essentially mismanages everything, and that includes public
talk about the understatement, Jason. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, this certainly might be a good thing, but if we don't change the way we're doing things, even if you did cash in all the land, if we don't change what we're doing, I mean, you don't think a whole bunch of people just say, "Oh, that means we get to spend more now," right? So I mean, I think it's only the voices like Thomas Massie, like Rand Paul, that would be there saying, "Hey, check that engine light, stupid. Our car's gonna blow up." And we just added a supercharger to it, right? or turbocharger. Overheat this thing. So
well, I mean, it is, all these points are valid in the sense that even if we did sell off, and let's suppose we could cut the debt in half, which will be probably ideal, I would think, just cut the debt in half, and our debt to GDP ratio will look a lot better than it is right now. But you are right, it may encourage even more spending, because people might say, well, we have things under control. We could fund this pork program. We could fund that pork program, and on it goes. And before you know, we're back to the same situation that we were in previously. So,
and we're really not making government smaller, too, if we just sell off the assets and increase the program sizes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're actually making the balance sheet worse over time. I mean, at least if you thought about it, I mean, somebody could say, "Hey, we can always cash this in." But if you tell these knuckleheads who are there now, and I don't mean the good knuckleheads of liberty, I mean the knuckleheads of Congress, if you tell them that, they might just very well take you up on your offer. Yeah, we didn't think about spending all that. Let's get that candy for kids back in the bill.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, so anyways, yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I think we've kind of spent the issue here, but I mean, these are kind of the issues, and where is MAGA going in the future? I mean, I guess before we leave the topic, where do you think MAGA is going? I mean, I kind of think they're a little rudderless, but well, what do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say rudderless, but I consider myself a liberty-minded person. I want small government and all those good things and that kind of stuff. I would probably put myself more in line with the Republican Liberty Caucus than anything else. But I think MAGA is drifting into more a center-right movement, where they are taking bits and pieces from the Democrats and bits and pieces from the Republicans and trying to form some movement around this kind of center-right party, because Trump is spending a lot of money. There's no doubt about that. That is not a liberty movement. That is not a conservative move. That is a move of the Democrats. But on the other hand, you see him doing things that we would support as liberty-minded people. Okay, and I think this war in Iran is a signal of him caring about the future of this country and the future of the next generation and the generation after that. So he have some policies that I think are good, that his instincts are good on, but this spending business is a real threat to the republic, and I don't think Trump pays enough attention to that, and I don't think his supporters pay enough attention to that. So where is MAGA going? I think MAGA is trying to straddle the Democrats and the Republicans and become some kind of center-right movement, where you take bits and pieces from either side and try to make it into one quote-unquote big beautiful bill or one big beautiful movement, is what I think is about to happen. So I don't think they're out of the game, and I don't think I think they'll remain in the game for quite a long time, because I think if things turn out the way I hope they do, I think J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio would probably form the next administration after Donald Trump is over. And they are both, I mean, J.D. is not as strong a MAGA as probably Rubio is, but I think they will continue the Trump policies for the most part if they do win in 2028. So I think MAGA will be around for a while. They probably will move a little more rightward, because Marco Rubio tends to be a little more on the right, and I think he'll have a lot of influence upon J.D. Vance if that's how the ticket forms. I think it will form that way, and if they win and stuff. So,
well,
but
I did want to mention that when you talk about J.D. Vance and Rubio, certainly if MAGA is doing well come 2028, those are the two names to watch.
Yes.
But the big question is, will MAGA be doing well then? And I mean, I think they have elevated Thomas Massie substantially with this. I mean, he was already fairly well-known congressman, and this really has, I think, put him up there on a pedestal as sort of a free agent now. And, you know, I think he could be the first really serious third-party candidate that we may wind up having seen. And I think there's a real possibility for that if this Iran thing turns into a real quagmire. If somehow Iran wraps itself up in a month with a nice bow on it, I think a lot of people will, come back to the fold on MAGA and say, hey, that as Ed Gowrine says, that 5D chess is really working miracles. but if it's not, and if that Iran is a real, anchor around MAGA, come, an albatross come the midterms, then it's possible that Trump may be dealing with a Democrat Congress, because everybody thought that was almost where it was headed anyways. And we had this whole redistricting thing, but
Yes.
That's going to have some thin margins. And if you have a whole bunch of disaffected people who might have supported Massie, and then suddenly everybody is upset with the way the war is going and high gas prices and everything else, now suddenly it's like, and even questioning why we're there, suddenly this becomes potentially, it could be the death knell for MAGA, in the coming years, because, if they're losing power going into 2028, I mean, you could be looking at a Democrat sweep of everything going into 2028. So, yeah.
It is quite possible that scenario is is very plausible. But I think Trump is well aware that he have to wrap this up very, very soon. It's starting to look like it's been extended way too long. And I think he's well aware of that, of the critical nature of wrapping this thing up, because sooner or later the politics is going to start biting in his ass. There's no doubt about that. But I don't. The problem I see that Trump is facing with this coming midterms, I don't think the Iranians will ever make a deal with Trump. Trump keep telling us that they want to make a deal, they want to make a deal, they want to make a deal. I don't think they will make a deal under the present set of circumstances. If Trump wants to get this thing done, he'll have to put troops on the ground. No amount of bombing will ever make these fanatics fold. They're not going to.
And just to add to what you're saying, I mean, one of the hopes people had is, hey, look, if they have to cap their oil wells, that may be the moment when they say, hey, this is a big problem because now we're going to have losses going into the future. Therefore, let's make a deal with Trump. Well, they're dumping their oil, is my understanding, into the Gulf. So it's kind of a big middle finger to Trump. So I don't think that this is, I don't think, like you said, I mean, it's possible it could wrap up. It's a war. There's lots of weird things that could happen. Who knows? But it doesn't seem like they're begging for this to end at this point, right?
No, they're not. No, they're not, because one of the things that they believe, and this is where their fanaticism comes into play, one of the things that they believe, the more chaos they could bring to this situation, the more likely the Al-Mahdi will return. The Al-Mahdi to them is like Jesus Christ to us Christians. And they want that. They long for that. They're hoping more chaos will come, because their beliefs involve the great Satan. The great Satan have now become us in the West, the United States in particular. And they believe the battle between them and the great Satan is what will bring the end times for them and the return of the Al-Mahdi. And this is what they are counting on, that the Al-Mahdi will be back and save them. And I don't think they will make, under the present condition, they will not make a deal with Trump. Their fanaticism will prevent them from doing so. So Trump will have to find a way to wrap this up in the next 2 months. Otherwise, the midterms will be a disaster, and the 2028 will be endangered for the Republicans.
Yeah. Well, I think we've about squeezed all the juice out of that topic. So let's get real quick to something stupid a Democrat said, so we can all leave with a smile on our faces after all of this MAGA drama.
MAGA drama. Okay.
So, well, as you've probably heard, things in Democrat-run cities aren't going the best. Certainly, if you live in one of them, you know that.
Yes. We don't have to tell you. We don't have to tell you.
Yeah. Well, Washington is one of those deep blue states, and they're having troubles of their own. And the mayor of Seattle, there, the biggest city, what she's saying, and this is a couple weeks old, so we're just getting to it, but the things that's coming out of her mouth don't inspire hope for the city of Seattle. So let's hear a little bit about this story.
Nearly a quarter of businesses are now considering leaving the state. That's according to a report from the Association of Washington Business. It found the state's employers are growing more pessimistic about the direction of the economy and looking to exit the state because of the rising tax burden. Over 400 employers were surveyed, and 24% said they're looking to move their business. That's up from 17% in the previous quarter. 55% of employers said they're considering moving their personal residence to another state. That's up from 44% the previous quarter. The AWB points to the nearly $10 billion in new taxes passed in 2025, followed up by this year's so-called millionaire's tax.
Wow. So a lot of wealthy people and businesses are considering leaving the state of Washington and the city of Seattle in particular. What does the mayor of Seattle think about this?
I think the claims that millionaires are going to leave our state are like super overblown. And if, the ones that leave, like, bye.
Bye.
You know.
I mean, all you have to do after listening to all this terrible stuff about what's going on with MAGA, just listen to a Democrat, and you can understand.
Yeah, why we see the Republicans as the lesser of the two evils here. You know, this woman, all she have to do is to go talk to a fellow Democrat, Kathy Holcomb, or whatever the hell her name is. Hochul. She's the governor of New York. She and Andrew Cuomo drove businesses and wealthy individuals out of New York, and they were happy about it. Bye. Oh God, keep going. Blah blah blah, all kind of stuff. Now Hochul is running all over the country now, trying to beg them to come back. Okay, because these damn fools didn't realize when these businesses leave, they're also taking their tax base, and these people are addicted to our hard-earned dollars. They call it taxes. It's really theft. That is what it is. They are addicted to it, and they can't do without it. So now Hochul is running all over the country, begging people to come back. And this idiot is going to have to do the same thing. She got to go start begging businesses to come back after she made a bye. Yes, bye. Bye. Yes, you damn fool. It will be bye to you when they are finished with you. Good Lord.
Yeah, it's just absolutely nuts, you know, and we see this. I mean, we're here in California, and we live in big blue cities, and you know, it's funny, you know, I work in a situation where I had an economist come to my office one day who was doing some work for our group, and the first thing he said to me because you have to drive down J Street, you know, on the way to our building, and you know, because he was coming in from the airport, and the very first thing he said when he saw me is he says, "What happened to your city?" That's not why he was coming. It had to do with completely different project. But I mean, you know, it's like you know, like what Stossel says. You know, you're sitting in the frog in the pot of boiling water, right? And you just don't notice as it slowly gets warmer. I mean, you know, I grew up in this city, and you just have all these empty storefronts, all these signs constantly saying vacancies, and and you know, just empty buildings downtown that, you know, God knows what's going on inside them because the windows are all boarded up. And you know, people just don't even realize that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the way it has to be. And yet, you know, we have these Democrats running these cities for long periods of time, and nobody seems to understand or know why. They just keep digging with the same policy tools. And anyways, and the guy was from the East Coast. I think he was from Boston or someplace else like that. But
it's just these Democrats and their big government programs that they think is so nice and wonderful is going to take us to that next wonderful utopia. You know, the thing is, I mean, you remember where I used to work in downtown Sacramento, right across the street, right across 9th Street. There used to be a little, in front of the water resources building, I don't want to call it a park, but it's a little place with sculptures and things like that. You could sit around there if you want to, and that kind of stuff. It used to be a pleasant, when I first went there, it was pleasant, it was nice, and that kind of stuff. At one time, they had renovated it and stuff. But after a while, in the last, I think 3-4 years that I was there, that I was working for the Energy Commission, people used to come there, homeless people, well, especially in the wintertime, they'll come there for the heat. There's one of those vents that give off heat. And they'll come there for the heat. They will eat there, they'll piss there, they'll poop there, everything right there and the stuff.
Yeah, what Democrats call the high life. Sorry.
Every once in a while, the police will come and clear them out. Right? Every once in a while, they come and they clear them out. Within 2 days, they come right back. And the police come back, clear them out. And this cycle just kept on going and going and going. That went on for 2 or 3 in my last 2 or 3 years at the Energy Commission. Every day I used to have to walk past that because I used to have to go down the street to catch a train. It was so disgusting. And this is what the Democrats do. They have all these nice, wonderful programs that is going to take us to utopia, these great, wonderful things. And it never does. It just brings misery to the people. God help us.
Leon, I got your story beat with a really quick anecdote. After I was, or I can't remember if this is after, this was after I was working in the downtown area. I was working in a office that was in the Midtown area. And I used to leave kind of late hours sometimes, around 6:30 or 7 sometimes. And I came out, and the building I was in had an overhang, kind of a, I don't know what they call that, but the roof extends an extra 8 feet out or whatever.
Yes.
From the door. And so it was covered. And so, of course, homeless people like that at night because they're not going to get rained on, right? And this wasn't a rainy night, but I was coming out at 7 o'clock, and I opened the door and I was in somebody's living room, as if it was a magic trick, and I'd transported there. And I just said, "Oh, excuse me," and I just closed the door and went back in and found another exit. And every time after that, I just looked at the security cameras before I left to see if anybody was there. And a lot of times I wound up having to use a side entrance where there was no overhang.
Yeah. Shit.
So, yeah.
Oh God, Lord.
So yeah, that's Sacramento living, folks.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. The high life of them in Democrat-run cities. Yes.
Yeah. California dreaming here.
Yes, California.
No, actually, it's maybe a little bit of a nightmare, but we're all used to it. So.
We're all used to it. That's right. But that is not I mean, we laugh about it. It sounds very funny, but it's not really a joke. We're getting used to it. We're getting so complacent that we start to adjust to the nastiness on the street. People sleeping all over the street, all over the place, and with their tent, and in your case, they're building little living rooms in front of buildings and all that kind of stuff. And we just getting adjusted. Like I used to walk by all this poop and everything to go to the train, and after a while, whenever I leave the building, I expect it, and I cover my nose when I have to, and I get on the road. You started looking at the cameras and to make sure you don't step into anybody's living room again and all that. But this is a problem. We are getting complacent and adjusted to this thing, and and this is bad. This is bad for the future of the city. Very bad.
Yeah, it's sad, and our kids are having to adjust in a lot of bad ways too. But anyways, yeah, that's going to do it for the show tonight. Boy, did we go long, and we didn't even get to the California gubernatorial stuff. So that's next week, so we will touch on that next week. We'll just have more topics on that because it'll be the last week before the primary here happens. But Leon, I can't think of it. Oh, I did want to at least bring back one last farewell to Mr. Massie. And I do have to say too that he is probably one of my favorite Congress people that we've ever had, just as a disclaimer. So it's kind of a little bit sad to see him go, but he's still going to be there for 7 more months. And gosh darn it, I had a meme I wanted to show too, but it shows, if you've seen that movie Office Space, it shows the guy who's coming to him for the TPS report, and he's saying, "Yeah, still going to need those Epstein files on my desk." So I think Trump's got 7 more months of that.
I don't think even though Thomas Massie had a setback yesterday, I don't think his life in the public eye is over.
No,
I really think he still have a lot to be said and a lot to get done, and I think he will do so. And I think as long as he holds true to the last sentence the last statement in his quote here, if legislators always vote with the Constitution, we'll have a republic. And I couldn't agree more about that statement, that we have to guard and care for our republic if the next generation is to inherit anything from us of this generation.
Well, there you have it. And if you're watching us before the next show, think about what you can do in your community to move the ball for liberty. And if Mr. Massie doesn't go back and run in Kentucky, maybe you can run for that seat that is held by Chicken Ed in 2028. So, until next time, stay tuned and stay free, or Bye.
Bye. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.